Joining me now in the studio is the Defence Minister Peter Dutton. Minister, we saw in that package Defence officials telling the Senate last month the axed French submarine contract would cost taxpayers up to $5.5 billion. They also said that that included about $3.2 billion in sunk costs, no pun intended. What do we have to show for that money that we've already spent?
Well, Laura, a couple of points. Firstly, there's a funding envelope there at the moment. That's not indicative of what the payout will be or what the negotiations will conclude. And at the moment, the Commonwealth is in discussions with Naval Group and other major contractors, so I'm not going to prejudice that negotiation, that discussion. So there's more within that package clearly than what we require. There's a contingency there. There's also other elements that will be paid out of that. So there's not, you've got this line item in the budget. And I think if you went on to some more of the evidence given at Senate estimates, I think they go into more detail about that. But that's the funding envelope. It'll be well short of that, I've no doubt. But that negotiation continues.
Well, I wasn't asking about the compensation, I was asking about those other sunk costs. Will any of the infrastructure or spending that has actually taken place so far be able to be applied to the construction and maintenance of the nuclear submarines?
Potentially, yes. So where we've got sunk cost in some of the facilities, for example, that can be transferred. And as we know, we require probably about 3 times the space that we've got at Osborne at the moment. We had the US and the UK and our officials from Australia there only a few weeks ago scoping out what was available, and that negotiation will continue. So we're projecting about 15,000 jobs by the end of this decade, including 5,000 jobs in South Australia in the naval shipbuilding enterprise. So there'll be significant economic benefit for our country. And of course, I'd much prefer to be out there today launching a submarine that Labor had commissioned, but of course they never did during their period in government. So we need to make the decisions now. And as we know, in 2016, there was no nuclear submarine available to us. The Americans had only ever shared that technology with the Brits in the 1950s and no one since then. And fortunately, we've now been able to negotiate that arrangement, and our country will be safer because of the decision we've made.
Well, you said last month, talking about wanting to make decisions fast, that the decision on whether to go with the US or British subs was being fast-tracked. The PM then said it wouldn't be made before the election. Is it still being fast-tracked, and will it be made this year?
Well, when I speak with my counterparts from the US and the UK, they're keen to condense it as much as we can. The 18 months is up in about March of 2023. But if we can condense that down, we will. But importantly, we're not going to get to the end of the 18-month mark and then announce the decision and then start the preparatory work. My intention is to make sure that we can have a decision around which boat we're going to go with, either the US or the UK submarine.
This year?
And from there, the balance of the 18 months will be to workforce issues, to transfer of IP, etc. And I've got to say, the US and the UK have been fantastic in the negotiations so far, and I think it's all very positive and very prospective.
How can you tell people in Adelaide that you'll hopefully get above 60% when you don't even know, which boat you're going to build? And secondly, what's the cost going to be of actually building onshore as opposed to a cheaper option offshore?
Well, if you look at what we've done so far in the offshore patrol vessels and in other classes where we've been building, and in fact right across the money that we've put into defence industry in our country, we have quite deliberately ramped up the amount of domestic content, Australian content. We've got about 100,000 jobs in the defence industry in Australia at the moment, and there's a huge multiplier into the economy as a result of that investment that we're making. So we get the defence capability, but we also grow a significant workforce. And there is a big element, particularly I think over the course of COVID and since then, to develop manufacturing of different components and additional components onshore. So there are many benefits to it, and once we've made a decision about which of the vessels we go with, then we can have more to say in that regard.
You've also said that you're going to spend $10 billion building an East Coast base for the submarines in one of 3 locations. When will a decision be made about that?
Well, Navy's gone through quite an extensive process. They've looked at about 19 locations. They've come back to 3. and they've got further work to do on those 3 locations. So Navy will make that decision and then we'll announce that in due course. But I'm not going to rush the process from Navy, but equally I want the decision to be made in a timely way so that we can make an announcement, get construction underway. And again, that will be a significant economic benefit to wherever that location is.
Well, finally, just on another matter, as a Queensland minister, the opposition leader was campaigning in Brisbane today on what he said was the government's too little, too late flood response, but the government's also being attacked for politicising the distribution of flood relief. How should voters in Queensland feel about the fact that they are receiving $350 a week less in income support than people in Lismore?
Well, Laura, I think if you have a look at the assistance that the government's provided through the Brisbane City Council, through the devastation that took place in Gympie as well, and we work very closely with the Queensland government, to be honest, and I made that very clear.
But it's still less than the people in Lismore are receiving.
Well, I think, again, if you look at what people are receiving, support that we've provided, the response from the Army, which was 4 times what it was in 2011 and a week earlier, I think as I move around my electorate, as we move around southeast Queensland, I don't get those gripes, to be honest. I think there is a recognition that the Commonwealth Government has provided significant support. We'll continue to do that through the rebuild. We demonstrated that in Grantham in 2011. There's always been a commitment from both Liberal and Labor. I just think this is above politics. And in Lismore, we saw, and in northern New South Wales, frankly, we saw the sort of devastation that we saw in Grantham in 2011, where that was more akin to a tsunami as opposed to waters rising, as devastating as the floods were.
But even the local member, the Nationals local member, said that it was absurd that people in Lismore get extra money.
Well, again, I think if you look at the circumstances from what I saw from the reports back from the men and women of the Australian Defence Force who were deployed, about 7,500, it was effectively a tsunami that went through in northern New South Wales, in some towns completely wiped out. In southeast corner of Queensland, there's some devastation that people will never recover from and that people are starting to rebuild from now in other circumstances, and we've been able to provide support to them. But as I say, it was more akin to what happened in Grantham in 2011, where essentially houses were just washed away as opposed to inundation. So there are well-established programs and protocols and thresholds that are met. But I think, as I say, that when I walk around and speak to those that have been affected, people are appreciative, frankly, of the support that the Queensland Government and the Australian Government's provided, and will continue to provide that support.
We're out of time. Thanks for your time tonight.
Thanks, Laura.
Hi, I'm Lee Sales. Thanks for watching this story. If you'd like to watch more of 730's stories, they are on the left of your screen. And tap on the button below to subscribe and get the latest from ABC News.